everybody, and welcome into the Great Scott Show, 8 o'clock hour. Jack Betch joining me in bottom of the hour, but joining me now, friend of the program, a friend of mine, a guy that has to spend some of his holiday in Cleveland, but doing something that he loves to do. And he's one of the best in the business. New Orleans Saints beat writer Luke Johnson joins us now. First of all, Luke, good morning. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. All of that stuff, man. I hope you're well, man. How are you feeling today?
I'm doing great, and right back at you, Scott. I hope you and your family are having a great Christmas season.
I tell you what, dude. Listeners are probably getting annoyed by me from talking about weather so much, but it's been brought up a lot. You know, UL's playing in the Independence Bowl Friday. The feels like temperatures down, around 1 or 2 degrees. I know for the Saints, the feels like temperatures, -9, the wind chill, everything. I didn't grow up in the Midwest like you, Luke, so I'm kind of a baby when it comes to this extremely cold weather stuff. But I've been told by some people that grow up in cold places, like, they like it. Like, do you like it when it's that cold? Do you really?
Well, here's the thing. It's like once it gets down below, like, a certain temperature, usually for me it's, like, down below, like, I don't know, like 25. Like, everything that happens below that is just, it's like, for lack of a better term, it's lagniappe, It's like, it's just cold, man. Like, there's not really, like, degrees of coldness. Like, you get down to single digits or below, and it feels the exact same. It feels miserable. So,
all right, there it is. There's the word I was looking for. Miserable. There it is. So yeah, he's not this is awesome.
But like, that's what I'm saying here, though. Like, it's going to be miserable, but it's not like going to be any more miserable than it would be if it was like 20 degrees or 25 degrees. Guys are going to be out there, and they're going to, try to show how tough they are. They're going to go warm up shirtless, and I'm going to be sitting up in the press box in climate control, wearing 4 jackets and all my gear.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I still marvel at the 1981 season, the AFC Championship game in Cincinnati, where the wind chill was -59. It's considered to be the coldest NFL game ever played, colder than the Ice Bowl. And Anthony Munoz, who's the greatest offensive lineman ever. I mean, he's an all-time great. Chris Collinsworth was telling this story about how they were and this is the team that was used to the cold weather. Of course, they crushed San Diego, who the week before played Miami, where it was like 88 degrees. So we're talking about a difference of like 100-plus degrees. But he's like, dude, we were wrapping. I mean, we had Vaseline on our skin. We had like 6 layers. We had trash bags over. Like, everyone was like, because, I mean, honestly, we're talking about, like, you could die. I mean, I'm not trying to be melodramatic. You could die in weather like that. And he's like, yeah, and Anthony just kind of rolls out, like, in his uniform, no sleeves. I'm like, that guy's not human. Like, there's just no way. There's no way.
Yeah. No, and that is 100% like a mental game, and I think it's a very stupid one. So I'm sure guys are going to be going out there and doing the same thing. They say it's just, it's not bothering them. And then, by the time the game's over, they're going to be like, I'm glad I'm in this heated locker room.
It's okay to acknowledge that it's cold and prepare for it, guys. But having said that, it's going to be cold on Saturday. The Saints are leaving, I think, tomorrow after practice. What kind of impact, based on how these two teams have been playing, what kind of impact on the game do you expect the weather to have?
I mean, it doesn't really work in the Saints' favor. They're a team that has, at times, really struggled against the run this season. Obviously, they're coming off a win where they gave up 231 yards on the ground to Tyler Algier. So now they're going to a cold weather game where the running game is going to be important against one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. Nick Chubb didn't practice yesterday, so his status is a little bit in doubt, but there's still, I mean, even if they don't have Nick Chubb, who, let's just be real about this, is, I think, in my mind, the best just pound-for-pound runner in the NFL, right? Like, he might not be the most complete complete running back in the NFL, but like when it comes to running the football, I don't think there's anybody better than Nick Chubb.
I'm with you.
Even if they don't have him.
Yeah, he's that good. I agree with you.
He's awesome. Even if they don't have Nick Chubb this weekend, they still have a really good offensive line, and I think we've seen with the Saints this year, it doesn't matter who they're going up against. If they're going up against a good, just rushing offense in general, those teams have had a lot of success against them. So, look, it's going to be tough. I mean, I think this is like the worst case scenario as far as conditions go, because it's playing right into the Browns' advantage, and it's something the Saints have often struggled with. They've often struggled to run the ball this year, and they've often struggled to defend the run. And I think that's going to be obviously the key to a game like this.
Luke Johnson, our guest. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm just like they've done a good job at times of playing up to their competition. I think they're just on paper probably about even with the Browns talent-wise, but just they've played some really good running attacks that they've slowed down. San Francisco was one of them. They played a really good defensive game that day, but that absolutely needs to be the case this week. Otherwise, they're going to get run out of the building.
Out of fear of sounding like a stereotypical like big city sports caller in the like afternoon drive that would call and say something like, guys, I mean, I know he's the backup, but when he goes in there, or that guy's he's so big. I mean, I'd put him in on offense. Let that big boy run. I don't want to sound like that here, Luke, but maybe I'll come across that way. So be it. You did a deep dive. You've done a lot of great work in your career, and I love the piece you did on Taysom Hill a few years ago. And you went back to his hometown in Pocatello, Idaho. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong.
Pocatello,
thank you. It's cold there. Taysom Hill is a physical runner. I would play Taysom Hill so much on Saturday, and I know he'll be part of the game plan, Luke, but I mean, I, who am not a coach and just sitting here on the microphone and just simply looking at weather and nothing else, I hate to sound so dumb and trivial, but this has got, in my mind, this has to be a Taysom Hill game. And I know they're not going to start him and play him the whole time, but he needs to be getting more snaps than he's gotten all season on Saturday.
Yeah, it feels like a no-brainer, right? If they're ever gonna go back to that 50-50 split, that they did earlier this year, I think it was might have been the Rams game where they just rotated them in and out. This is absolutely the game to do it, and just kind of let Taysom take a huge part of the offense and just lean into his strength a little bit there. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. The situation kind of dictates that to the Saints if they're being smart. If they go out there, and I think Andy Dalton has had a really good season, a better season than a lot of people are giving him credit for. But if they go out there and they let him sling the ball around 30 times,
seems like a disaster. Just seems like a disaster. The Saints have struggled to tackle all this year, and I'm picturing them, trying to tackle in that weather. And from a fan standpoint, Luke, as I shift gears for a moment, it's funny because the Saints sweep the Falcons, which, having grown up on the Saints and been going to games my whole life outside of the job just as a fan, that's always important. It was kind of like when the season really started going south, I would tell the listeners, hey, look, you can just win on December 18th. It's something you can hang your hat on. It's a really good thing. And then, the all-time series is tied, and the Saints take a one-game lead in the regular. It's bigger than just, if you looked at it in a vacuum of this season, maybe not a big deal, but in the context of this franchise, big deal. And yet they won Sunday, and, man, I had so many fans that were happy and mad at the same time because they're like, well, SOB, if they had just not blown that disastrous game to the Bucs, they'd be in first place, and now this and that and the other. And it's almost like the way this season is gone, and I get it. I get it when you look at it from a fan standpoint, but it's almost like the way the season is gone, they can't win even when they're winning. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. No, I read about it yesterday. It's like I went back and rewatched the game. It's like they almost felt like they had to be in a position where they were apologizing for the way they won that game.
Right, you're right. You're right.
Like even then, because they won the game, but they almost blew it, and they almost blew it by just being completely unable to stop the run, and by just like laughably blowing all these offensive opportunities. So it's like on the one hand, you're like, oh, finally they won, like something positive to talk about. And then like on the other hand, the only thing you really want to talk about afterwards is like all the ways in which they messed up, and that's just like kind of been the case with the team this season. I mean, there are countless plays where you look back and they're like, if they just made that play.
One play, they're in first place in this putrid division. Yeah.
Well, they might, I mean, a couple different games, if they make that one play, I mean, they might have a winning record right now.
They feel, you're right. They feel at times they feel close, and then at other times they feel so far away, and like that.
And sometimes in the same, right. In the same game,
dude. Sometimes on the same drive,
13-0 to the 49ers.
Ugh.
And they're dropping a couple different passes in the end zone. Alvin Kamara's fumbling at the 1 yard line. They could have beat that team. The 49ers, I think, might be the best team in the NFL.
Defense,
their defense is just
stout.
They could have beat Minnesota. They're missing opportunities in every single one of those games.
They should have beaten Tampa Bay, obviously.
Obviously should have beat Tampa. But like they're so close to having the narrative of the season be completely different. But obviously the narrative is going to be what it's going to be when they're not making those plays.
Right.
And like that's even in the wins. Even in the wins, you're just looking at like, God, they were so close to losing that game. And that's part of that is just it's the nature of the NFL. Like you're going to play in a lot of close games. Nobody's going to play a perfect game. There's never been a team that went out and just won, all of its games by 50 points. But there's the margin is just even crazier for this weird Saints team.
It's been an odd season to say the least. Luke Johnson, our guest at Luke Johnson, BY Luke Johnson on Twitter. Is the NFC South going to ultimately go down as the worst division ever by the time this season wraps up?
God, I think so. I mean, I think it's worse than that NFC South a couple of years ago where the Panthers won it with a losing record.
Yeah.
I think it's worse than that NFC West a few years ago where the Seahawks won that with a losing record. And obviously, Saints are familiar with that team. I mean, it's bad, man. Like, there is a scenario where the division could come down to a three-way tie between 3, 7, and 10 teams. 3 teams that are 3 games under 500. And in that scenario, the Saints would win the NFC South.
Explain to our listeners that scenario right there.
Okay, so basically, this is the only way, really, the Saints could get in if they lose one of the next 2 games, right? If they lose one of their non-division games against either the Browns or the Eagles, they would have to then win out. That would put them at 7-10. And in order for the Saints to win the division at 7-10, they need the Buccaneers to lose all of their remaining games, which means the Buccaneers would have to lose to Atlanta and Carolina. And for the Saints to win out, they'd have to beat Carolina in Week 18, which would set up a scenario where all 3 are 7-10. The Bucs are 6-11.
Goodness.
And the Saints would win on the first tiebreaker, which is it's like a cumulative head-to-head for the 3 teams that are tied. So the Saints in that scenario would be 3-1, and the Panthers would be 2-2 because DJ Moore ripped his helmet off against the Falcons after catching what should have been a game-winning.
It sounds like you're really hoping that plays out because, man, you would have plenty to write about.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if any of us deserve to to have an extra week of this football season, So
you know what? That's a good point. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's how crazy it is, right? And, this could all be moot. Like if the Saints lose on Saturday, I mean, the Buccaneers could eliminate them from playoff contention by beating a very, very bad Cardinals team that's, maybe has its third string quarterback in on Sunday, right? Like
they got one home win this season, Luke, and you know who that was against. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, that game too. Saints were on their way to just blowing those guys out.
Back-to-back pick sixes. I'll never forget Dennis Allen saying, "I just told him to keep doing what he's doing." Like, oh, Dennis, man, Let me ask you about Dennis here, as we got you for about another 5 minutes, Luke, and we always appreciate the time. I often talk about, to the listeners, how a coach handles the media and how it really can it can make a huge difference in perception, huge. And I don't mean necessarily even like what you guys write about as much as what they're doing at the podium, what they're doing on the microphone. And Sean Payton, granted, he got a little better at it throughout his career, but he knew the game. Dennis Allen is not the most charismatic guy. He has said things on the microphone that I'm sure it's just coach speak to him, but the way it comes across to fans is like, what? You've dealt with a lot of different coaches. How is, in your mind, Dennis Allen when it comes to how he handles? Am I overstating here? Like, I think he's bad at it, but I'm also not there all the time like you. No, I just kind of see it from the window over here in Lafayette, and I'm just like, man, that's what you said. I don't know.
I think he's in a tough spot because obviously, his first season has not gone according to plan. So there's a lot of analysis of a lot of things he says and does. I think that at times his body language has been pretty poor. Right, especially in the midst of some of those really tough stretches, I think after the Pittsburgh loss, he just looked just devastated up at the podium, right? And I think a lot of people have latched onto that. The Andy Dalton thing, at the halftime interview against the Cardinals, I got what he was saying, right? Because Andy was playing a pretty good game up to that point. And then, one pick six, bounces off his receiver's hands. Another one is set up because, two guys drop passes on the previous plays. So he's making a desperation heave down the field or whatever. So I get what he's saying because he was playing a pretty good game and he had, a couple freak plays happen and he's like, just keep playing well. But, everybody is they kind of latch onto the fact that what he just did was he threw 3 interceptions.
So I don't even disagree with you, but I think it goes back to knowing how to handle that aspect of the job.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and I think he's struggled with that this year, for sure. I think he has done himself no favors, and even as much as I hate to admit it, because I'm grateful that we don't have somebody trying to bite our heads off every time we ask about an injured player. Right. I think the way he's spoken a little bit about injuries, but not really diving into them, has just created a sense of confusion among the fans. Where he says one thing and then he says a player is getting better, and then the next thing you know, they're put on season-ending IR. Just a little bit of truth instead of the full thing or nothing at all. I think you're putting yourself in a kind of a box with the fan base when they're hearing that. So yeah, I think he's if he's back next season, which I'm personally assuming he's going to be back, right? I think it'd be a pretty bad look for them to move on from their handpicked guy after 1 year, after he had several players missing for injuries and all that stuff. I don't know who they'd convince to come in under that situation. But like he's got to be better at just the image he projects when he's at a podium next year for sure. And I don't think it's like a a problem that we're presenting for him. I think he's making his own.
There you go. Right. No, that I think you just worded it perfectly there. Luke Johnson, our guest. Is there anything over the next few weeks in your mind that will dictate whether or not he does or doesn't return next season?
Well, I've felt all along that that he was going to get another crack at this, pretty much regardless what happened, with the one caveat being like unless the bottom completely falls out, right? If they just don't have guys playing for him. If they just like lose out and they look really, really bad doing it, maybe they have their hand forced. I have a really hard time seeing that happening. They're still in the mix. I think his guys played really, really hard on Sunday against Atlanta. I think they've got some really good young players. It would just have to be like just an abject disaster in the last 3 weeks, in my opinion. Now, who knows? My colleague Jeff Duncan wrote a column about the Saints need to bring Sean Payton back.
I don't think that's happening.
I don't think Jeff is just writing that to write it. I'm sure there's been some thoughts about that within both the organization, within the Payton household, right? I think that's like the only scenario I can imagine in which they'd move on from Dennis Allen after 1 year. Because look, like I just referenced, if you handpick a guy, and then you fire him after 1 year after his starting quarterback was hurt, early in the season, and the All-Pro wideout is playing 2 games, and your five-time Pro Bowl defensive back is playing 5 games, and just injury after injury after injury with this team. Who's going to want to see that and then see the cap situation the Saints have and see the fact that they don't have a first-round pick and they don't have a quarterback on the roster that is really like the future of the franchise? Be like, that's where I want to go. I'm going to pick that team over all the other ones. It's like, I don't think so. I think they'd be setting themselves up to maybe be in this coaching carousel for a while. So, I would just say to be careful what you wish for if you're a Saints fan wanting Dennis Allen axed and have no clear succession plan there.
It's going to be the talk of the offseason one way or the other, but there's still some football to be played. Luke, man, normally our conversations are a bit more uplifting, so I'm sorry if it was such a downer here this morning.
We're all just feeling the weather, man.
That's what it is. That's what it is. All right, we got about a minute. You watching anything lately? I know you've been busy. You might not have had time. Anything worth checking out? We usually talk war movies or TV shows or something, but we're short on time this morning.
Oh man, we did watch. No. Actually, we watched. We watched the Staircase, which is like based on real life.
I saw that documentary. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't see the show. Oh, so you guys watched the show or the documentary?
We watched the show.
Okay.
And it was a little bit slow for me, and I just
did you watch? Have you watched Severance?
The main character. That's still on our list. So we had to mix some. We had to mix some different style of show in because we've been watching a lot of fast paced stuff.
Yeah,
we watched The Staircase, and I was just it was a little slow for me. We followed that up by kind of breezing through Obi-Wan, which I thought was pretty solid. So
good stuff.
We're going to be making our way through a lot of what I'm assuming to be good stuff here in the near future. So next time we talk, I'm sure I'll have something good to talk about here.
Awesome, brother. But look, man, I'm going to let you run. I appreciate you taking the time. All the best. Merry Christmas. Safe travels to Cleveland. Stay warm. And I know I'll be talking to you again in the future.
Sounds good, man. Talk to you soon.
You got it. That is Luke Johnson at by Luke Johnson on Twitter. Go follow him. Go read his stuff.